Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm Washington State government reporter for the Center Square, Carlene Johnson, along with our investigative reporter, TJ Martinell, who this week wrote a story about large tax increases. We know those largest ever in state history and record revenue coming in, but still the state's wallet could be empty by the end of the next or the current biennium. Okay, what did we learn from the Economic and Revenue Forecast Council this week, TJ?
Well, you pretty much summed it up. They passed the largest tax increase in state history amid record revenue levels, and yet they still might run out of money by the end of the biennium. For people who don't know, that's 2027. So
once again, this sounds like this is not a revenue problem. Record revenues coming in. It's a spending problem, right?
I mean, yes, that's what a normal person would say. That's not what Governor Ferguson said in the press release statement. He blamed it on Trump's tariffs.
Oh, yeah. Draw me the direct line there, because I must see.
That's the thing is, revenue is still increasing. It's just not increasing fast enough to keep up with spending. That's pretty much what's going on. I mean, it's hard to argue with math. So, you know, you can't blame tariffs on running out of money when you've got the largest amount of taxes and the largest amount of revenue in state history and say, oh, because of tariffs, we don't have enough money to cover our we've got a cash flow problem. So, yeah. So
the new projections for increased revenue for about $8 billion more from what we had back in March of this year. Is that primarily a result of them going, okay, now we've got all these tax hikes that were passed by the 2025 legislative session. And so that's going to bring in more money than we thought. And yet we're going to be still spending that faster than we're bringing it in.
That's pretty much it. I mean, it's, I don't know what else to say other than, the revenue is not increasing fast enough, even with all these taxes, which is insane. Revenue is still not increasing fast enough to keep up with the amount of spending that's going on. And they would talk about the tariffs. Well, like, how much of an impact did that have on revenue? And what's the correlation between what you expected to bring in and what you're actually bringing in? I mean, how much money do they think that cost Washington State to the point where they're going to have at the end of the biennium $80 million? And for, that seems like a lot of money for an average person. When you have an $80 billion budget, $80 million is not a lot of money.
And now remind folks watching the Economic and Revenue Forecast Council members, this are comprised of folks it's nonpartisan, right? These people, they shouldn't have any vested interest in, projecting revenue more, making things look rosier than they're going to be. But there was some pushback. I know you wrote about, Representative Ed Orcut and some of the comments that he made. So touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, he actually kind of had more of a positive spin on it. He said, hey, we just found this out. It's the beginning of the biennium. We've got time. It's not like the second year of biennium at like the last minute. So we can figure this stuff out in January if there's a problem in September, like where we're going to have, if we're going to have to intervene. The state treasurer mentioned, hey, we got the rainy day fund. That's what it's for. And I can appreciate what they said. At the same time, if you're a Washington State taxpayer, you're going to say, you guys have record revenue level, and you pass the largest tax increase in state history, and you still have to worry about possibly plugging going in the red with your treasury. Like, you're still worried about your wallet being empty at the end of the day. Like, how does that happen?
And the comments from Rep Orcut, we've got time to fix this. What does that look like? I assume that would mean coming back in the 26th legislative session, the short session, and having to maybe undo some of these tax hikes or some of the, planned spending. I mean, how else are you going to fix it?
I think I'll be practical or pragmatic and say they're not going to cut any taxes and they're not going to reduce spending. What they're probably going to do is they're going to take money from the rainy day fund and use it to plug any potential gaps, because that's the easy, cheap, quick, dirty way to fix it. I don't see them like repealing a tax. That's probably now the revenue's tied to some sort of spending that they would have to cut. And then they got to go to their constituents and say, yeah, we had to cut this. They don't want to do that. So they're not going to.
And the other unknown out there that could present an even gloomier, forecast the next time out, but certainly by year's end, is these tax hikes that, are, well, some already kicked in under emergency clauses, but the rest of them basically July 1 kicking in, massive increases in B&O taxes and cap gains and estate taxes and property tax hikes, and whether or not that's going to lead to, business flight, which then, or the continued wealthy flight, the Bezoses of the world getting the heck out of here, that could have a huge impact on incoming revenue.
Right. That's this is the problem, is that they're forecasting, but the forecasts change. And so they could come in September and find out that a whole bunch of people left the state that thought was going to pay the capital gains income tax, and they don't, or there's something else that comes up. I mean, I think it's really important to stress right now for people who are listening, they are dealing with a potential cash flow problem at a time of record revenue levels. We are not in the middle of a recession or an economic depression. If there's a recession, like that's kind of just, it's like somebody's making $10 million a year and they don't have any money. Like, what's going to happen when they don't have $10 million coming in? They're only making like 200,000, something like that. So that's kind of the context, is they have more money than they've ever had in state history, and they're still having a cash flow problem. So if there's an economic recession or something in the future, there's going to be a crisis. That legislative session will be one for the history books in terms of them having to come to terms with reality of you cannot raise enough tax. You cannot increase or create enough new taxes to cover the shortfall that would result from that, because of what's going on.
Having sat in on those legislative hearings during this past session and hearing that very logical, rational argument made by members of the minority party, it fell repeatedly on deaf ears. I mean, this is exactly what they said would happen. And now here we are. We've got the state treasurer saying, look out, guys. When these forecasts come out, the projections for revenue, does the state treasurer then make any recommendations, or does he just go, here's the numbers, you guys figure out what to do with it?
I mean, his recommendation is that there would be 10%, I think, of the budget would be in the rainy day fund. So, or something like that. Like, he basically just said, hey, like, you need enough money in the rainy day fund to be able to cover any kind of shortfall or any kind of deficit in the budget. And, there's money there, but a couple $1 billion, when you have an $80 billion budget, a couple $1 billion is not significant.
Right. And is that what the rainy day estimate is right now? Is it around $2 billion?
Well, by the end of the biennium, it's supposed to be, I think, $2.3 billion, which, and that was before, that's part of the current budget. But I mean, that's where, great, you had to use that money to plug this cash flow problem. But if there's an economic recession, like I was saying, this is not going to help them. I mean, they were looking at a multi-billion-dollar budget shortfall, and I think that's still going to be there potentially. But that's what's going on, is if anything goes wrong with the economy in the next 2 years, the state is going to be in a serious financial situation. And as I was saying, and I'll keep saying this, that legislative session will be one for the history books, because it'll be where lawmakers have to cut spending and have to make tough financial decisions that they have not really had to do since the Great Recession, in the early 2010s. That's when they were really having to cut. I was going to college, not to age myself, but I was going to college roughly around that time. And that was when they were cutting funding for higher education. So I got out of college early, actually. I graduated early because I knew the tuition was going to spike. So because they were just not going to fund it the same way they did. So that was when they had to make tough financial decisions. But they've been used to having so much economic prosperity since then that I don't think that they know what having to cut significant.
No, they haven't had to do it. You're right. And so this next session is going to be crazy. And the next forecast I know for the general fund revenue, is scheduled to come out September 23rd this year. I know you're going to be all over it and watching it and talking with lawmakers about, upcoming plans. It seems like the session just ended, but we're already talking about lots of work to be done for the 26th session. So thank you, TJ, for writing on this. And for our readers that would like to read more about this article, thecentersquare.com, along with TJ Martinell. I'm Carlene Johnson. This has been Washington in Focus.